At the fringes of the battlefield, a squad of human soldiers crouched behind an outcropping of rocks. Lieutenant Kira Valen squinted through her binoculars, trying to make sense of what she was seeing. The heat from the smoldering craters made the air shimmer, distorting the hulking figures of the Xarvonian soldiers. Their warlord, Kargus, massive and intimidating even from a distance, stood tall in the center of their ranks, 3 pairs of glowing red eyes scanning the area with disdain. But it wasn't the Xarvonians that had Kira baffled. No, it was what they were dragging into view. A dog. A golden retriever, to be exact. Its fur was matted with dirt, its tongue hanging out in a happy pant as it trotted alongside the guards, tail wagging, as if this was the best day of its life. A thick metal collar was fastened around its neck, with heavy chains attached, though the creature seemed oblivious to its captivity. It barked once, playfully, as the Xarvonians shoved it forward in front of Kargus. "Is that?" A dog sergeant Edan Kor muttered from Kira's side, voice dripping with disbelief. Kira lowered the binoculars, her mind still reeling. "Looks like it." "That can't be what command sent us for," Edan added, shaking his head. "They said we were retrieving a high-priority asset, Tom. Something that could turn the tide of this battle. And that he jabbed a finger at the dog is definitely not it." "Well, it's what we've got," Kira replied, trying to make sense of the situation. The mission briefing had been cryptic, even by command standards. All they were told was that the Xarvonians had captured something classified as dangerous, and that it needed to be retrieved before the enemy could weaponize it. She had expected some kind of advanced alien technology, or maybe even a biological weapon. Not a golden retriever. "Maybe they've made a mistake," Edan continued. "I mean, the Xarvonians look more confused than anything. Look at them, they're laughing." Indeed, Kargus and his soldiers were jeering, the warlord bellowing in his deep, resonant voice. He stepped closer to the dog, bending low to inspect the harmless-looking creature with contempt. He raised a clawed hand and prodded the dog's side with a sharp, talon-like finger. The dog responded by rolling onto its back, legs in the air, tongue lolling out of its mouth as it waited for belly rubs. One of the Xarvonian guards doubled over in laughter, and even Kargus couldn't help but snort, clearly enjoying the spectacle. The massive warlord straightened up, addressing his troops in the Xarvonian tongue, his voice booming with amusement. "Now they're mocking it," Kira muttered. "They're not the only ones," Edan added, shaking his head in disbelief. "There's no way command seriously thinks this thing can." Enough, Kira cut him off, lowering her binoculars and gripping her rifle. "We have our orders. This thing is our asset, and we're getting it out of there." Edan exchanged a wary glance with the others in the squad. Private Lena, their sniper, looked equally dubious, her rifle trained on the Xarvonian guards as she muttered something under her breath. "If this goes sideways, you know we're going to look like idiots, right?" Kira ignored the comment, focusing on the mission. Orders were orders, no matter how ridiculous they seemed. "Lena, keep your sights on Kargus. Edan, you're with me. The rest of you be ready for extraction. We move as soon as the opportunity presents itself." With a deep breath, Kira began to crawl forward, her eyes locked on the golden retriever, who, as far as she could tell, had no idea it was in any danger. It looked back at the Xarvonian guards, tail wagging furiously, as if this whole thing was some elaborate game. "How the hell do you sneak up and extract a dog?" Edan whispered, crawling beside her. Carefully, Kira replied through clenched teeth. They reached the outer edge of the Xarvonian encampment, the distant rumble of war machines and plasma fire echoing around them. The dog, blissfully unaware of the war and chaos, was now sniffing the ground, tail wagging with delight as it caught some intriguing new scent. Kira gave the signal to the squad, her heart pounding. Whatever this creature was, it was time to retrieve it. But before she could make a move, the ground beneath her trembled. A low, menacing growl echoed across the battlefield. Kira froze, her eyes snapping back to the dog. It had stopped sniffing, its body rigid, ears perked up in sudden alertness. The playful, harmless demeanor was gone, replaced by something primal. "What the hell?" Edan began, but Kira silenced him with a look. The golden retriever's fur bristled, and a strange electric energy seemed to pulse in the air around it. The dog's eyes, once warm and soft, darkened, turning almost black as it focused on Kargis. The Xarvonian warlord seemed to sense the shift, his laughter dying in his throat. He barked something to his guards, ordering them to hold the creature back. But the dog's muscles tensed, and in a blur of motion it moved. The chains that had once restrained it snapped like brittle twigs as the dog lunged forward, straight at Kargis. The warlord's eyes widened in shock, his massive frame stumbling backward as the golden blur closed the distance in seconds. Kargis swung his arm, aiming to swat the dog away, but it was too fast. It ducked under his strike, darting around his legs, and then, with a growl that was far too deep for any normal dog, it leaped onto Kargis's back. The warlord let out a roar of fury, his claws scrabbling at the dog's form, but the creature was relentless. Its teeth sank into the back of Kargis's neck, and with a feral snarl, it twisted its head. The sound of ripping flesh and bone echoed across the battlefield as Kargis crumpled to the ground, lifeless. Kira stared, mouth open in disbelief. The creature stood over Kargis's fallen body, its muzzle stained with the warlord's blood. It looked back at the remaining Xarvonian soldiers, who now stood frozen in shock, too stunned to react. Lieutenant Edan whispered, eyes wide. What did we just watch? The dog turned its gaze toward Kira and her squad. Its eyes glowed with an eerie intelligence, far beyond anything a normal animal should possess. And then, just as quickly as the change had come, it was gone. The creature trotted over to them, wagging its tail happily, as if nothing had happened. It gave a soft bark, panting and wagging its tail like it was ready for its next walk in the park. Eden started again, but Kira held up a hand, still processing. Let's just get it on the ship, Kira finally said, her voice barely above a whisper. She glanced at the remains of Kargis and then back at the dog, who was now happily sitting at her feet, looking up at her expectantly. Right, Eden muttered, running a hand over his face. This was not in the briefing. The extraction shuttle hummed as it hovered just above the battlefield, its engines stirring up dust and debris. Kira stood with her squad at the landing zone, the dog sitting obediently by her side, seemingly oblivious to the chaos it had caused. Xarvonian forces had fallen into disarray after their leader's abrupt and gruesome demise. Without Kargis, the once feared Empire's soldiers had retreated in panic, leaving the battlefield in the hands of the human forces. Victory had come faster and more decisively than anyone had anticipated, and yet the cause of that victory sat wagging its tail, waiting for a treat. Kira glanced down at the dog, still unable to shake what she had witnessed. The ease with which the creature had taken down Kargis, the galaxy's most feared warlord, was beyond anything she could comprehend. And now it acted as if it hadn't just changed the course of an intergalactic war. You really don't look the part, Kira muttered to the dog, shaking her head in disbelief. The creature tilted its head, giving a soft bark in response, as if agreeing with her. The shuttle's ramp lowered, and Captain Lennox emerged, his eyes scanning the scene. When they landed on the dog, his brows furrowed. That's the asset. Kira nodded slowly. That's it. Lennox took a step forward, crouching to inspect the golden retriever. It looks like a... It is a dog, Sir Edan interrupted, unable to hold back anymore. But it's not just a dog. Kira bit her lip. It killed Kargis, snapped his neck like it was nothing. Lennox stood slowly, his gaze now fixed on the dog with newfound respect. This little thing. Kira nodded again. Yes, sir. We're still trying to wrap our heads around it. Lennox exhaled, shaking his head. Well, looks like Command knew more than they let on. He straightened and signaled to the extraction team. Get it aboard. We'll run tests, figure out exactly what we're dealing with. The dog trotted up the ramp obediently, leaving the human standing in its wake, still bewildered by what they had just witnessed. As the shuttle began its ascent, Kira exchanged a glance with Edan. So, what do you think it is? Aiden shook his head, still dumbfounded. I don't know, Lieutenant. But one thing's for sure, it's not just man's best friend. Weeks later, rumors of the golden retriever that toppled the Xarvonian Empire spread like wildfire. Soldiers joked about it in mess halls, spinning tales of how a good boy ended a war. But those who had seen it in action knew the truth. Whatever that creature was, it was far more than a simple dog. And as Kira sat in her bunk, replaying the battle in her mind, she couldn't help but wonder if a dog could do this. What else had humanity yet to discover about the galaxy's strange and unpredictable creatures? Because if this was just the beginning, then the universe had a lot more surprises in store. In the weeks following the fall of Karges and the Xarvonian Empire, the golden retriever, now simply called the dog by the humans, became the subject of endless speculation. What was it? A genetically enhanced weapon? Some kind of alien intelligence wearing the form of a friendly Earth pet? No one knew for sure, and Command wasn't sharing any more information than they had to. The dog had been transported to a secure facility aboard the flagship Orion's Reach, where scientists and researchers from all over the galaxy converged to study it. It underwent test after test, though the creature itself didn't seem bothered by the attention. Whenever Kira saw it on her visits, it was the same playful, friendly animal she had met on the battlefield, tail wagging, ears perked, ready to play. But no matter how many tests they ran, no one could figure out what made it so dangerous. It was, in every measurable way, just a dog. Normal bones, normal blood work, normal brain activity. And yet, when they reviewed the footage from Xarvonia Prime, the same baffling scenes played out: the dog taking down Karges, moving faster and more lethally than any biological creature should be capable of. Command had kept the whole incident classified. Official reports described Karges' death as a result of a covert and highly advanced human strike team. The dog's role was kept under wraps, known only to a select few. One evening, after another long day of debriefings and paperwork, Kira found herself drawn to the dog's containment area. It wasn't under lock and key, not exactly. The dog had a comfortable living space aboard Orion's Reach, complete with a wide-open enclosure, grass and trees. If you didn't know better, you'd think it was just a luxury kennel for a pet. But Kira knew better. As she approached, she saw the dog lounging in the grass, chewing happily on a stick. When it saw her, it jumped up, bounding over to greet her with the same excited energy it always had. Kira smiled despite herself, kneeling down as the golden retriever nuzzled her, seeking attention. "Hey buddy," Kira murmured, scratching behind its ears. "You've been keeping busy." The dog barked happily, wagging its tail. If it had any sense of what it had done, how it had shifted the balance of power in the galaxy, it didn't show it. To anyone else, it was just an ordinary dog. "You've got the whole galaxy talking, you know," Kira said, sitting back on the grass, still petting the dog. "Command's trying to figure out what to do with you." The dog flopped down beside her, resting its head on her lap, eyes half closing in contentment. Kira chuckled. "You're not too concerned, huh?" "Of course not. Why would you be?" She stared out at the distant stars, thinking about the sheer absurdity of the situation. Here was a creature capable of taking down the most feared warlord in the galaxy, and yet it was the same creature that would roll over for a belly rub without a second thought. What had Command unleashed? What was the dog? And how long before someone else, some other species or faction, tried to claim it for themselves? Kira sighed. She knew she wasn't going to get any answers tonight, but she couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning of something much larger. Something that neither humanity nor the galaxy was ready for. After a while, the dog stood up, its tail wagging again as it pranced around in circles, eager for something. Kira grinned and picked up the stick it had been chewing on, giving it a toss. The dog bolted after it, happily retrieving it and bringing it back, ready for another round. "You're something else," Kira muttered, shaking her head. "Something else entirely." As the dog dropped the stick at her feet and looked up at her with those big, trusting eyes, Kira realized that whatever came next, she couldn't help but feel a strange sort of peace. For all the mystery surrounding it, for all the mystery surrounding it, for all the power and danger it represented, the dog was still. Well, just a dog. And somehow, in a galaxy full of chaos, that was comforting. Days turned into weeks, and Kira and her squad returned to their regular duties aboard Orion's Reach. The war with the Xarvonians had ended abruptly, and while skirmishes still popped up across the galaxy, the defeat of their leader had sent shockwaves through the remaining factions. Without their warlord, the Xarvonian Empire fractured, each splinter faction vying for control, but none with the might or unity to challenge humanity or its allies. Still, whispers of the dog spread. Soldiers, officers, and even diplomats spoke in hushed tones about the mysterious creature that had toppled the mighty warlord. The legend of the golden retriever that ended the war took on a life of its own. Every tale seemed more exaggerated than the last. Some said it could take down a whole army single-handedly, while others claimed it was some ancient guardian sent by a forgotten alien race. But for Kira and her squad, the truth was far stranger and much simpler. Its nature remained a mystery, its loyalty was undeniable. Then came the day that changed everything. Kira was called to the command bridge, summoned by Captain Lennox himself. She wasn't sure what to expect, but the urgency in his voice over the comms had her on edge. When she arrived, Lennox was standing by the main viewport, staring out into the void of space. His expression was tense, more serious than she'd ever seen him. "Lieutenant," he said without turning, "there's been a development." Kira frowned. "Sir." Lennox handed her a datapad, the screen displaying intelligence reports from various sources. "There's a new player in the game, a faction we haven't dealt with before. They've been quiet, but our scouts picked up some troubling activity." Kira scanned the reports. "The Arcalians? I've heard rumors, but—" "They're more than rumors," Lennox interrupted. "They've been watching, waiting, and now they're making moves. Fast ones." Kira's stomach dropped. "What do they want?" Lennox's gaze hardened. "The dog." Kira blinked, unsure if she'd heard him correctly. "They want the dog. They know what it did on Xarvonia Prime," Lennox said, his voice low, "and they want it. Badly. We intercepted a transmission they're planning a strike. They want to capture it, use it for their own ends." Kira's heart raced. She had known this day might come, but not this soon. "How soon are we talking?" "Too soon," Lennox replied grimly. "We've already initiated evacuation protocols. We're moving the dog to a secure facility far from here, somewhere off the grid. You and your team will oversee the transport." Kira nodded, her mind already racing through the logistics. "Understood. Well—" A sudden explosion rocked the ship, the lights flickering as alarms blared to life. Kira stumbled, catching herself against the console as Lennox shouted orders to the crew. "They're here," Lennox growled, eyes blazing with urgency. "The Arcalians are here." Kira didn't need to be told twice. She sprinted from the command bridge, heading straight for the dog's containment area. Her squad was already moving, gathering their gear and preparing for what was likely to be the toughest mission of their lives. The ship rumbled again, and Kira could feel the shift in gravity as they initiated evasive maneuvers. The Arcalians were attacking full force, and it wouldn't be long before they breached the ship. As she reached the dog's enclosure, Kira found it standing calmly by the door, tail wagging as if it were just another day. The juxtaposition between the chaos outside and the dog's serene, friendly demeanor was almost surreal. "Come on," boy, Kira muttered, grabbing its leash, though she knew by now the leash was more for show than necessity. "We've got to get you out of here." The dog barked in response, trotting alongside her as if it knew exactly what was at stake. The corridors of Orion's Reach were a war zone. Arcalian boarding parties had breached the outer hull, and Kira's squad was engaged in fierce combat as they made their way to the escape shuttle. Plasma bolts whizzed past them, the air thick with smoke and the acrid smell of burning metal. Edan, his face streaked with grime, ducked behind a bulkhead, shouting into his comms. "We're pinned down. Too many of them." Kira fired a few rounds, taking out an Arcalian soldier before ducking back into cover. The dog, to its credit, stayed calm, crouched low and waiting patiently by her side. "Get to the shuttle," Kira ordered. "I'll cover you." Her team moved as one, pushing through the chaos with the dog in tow. The Archalians fought fiercely, but they hadn't anticipated the raw determination of Kira's squad. Inch by inch, they advanced, taking out enemy after enemy. Finally, they reached the shuttle bay. The dog bounded up the ramp first, turning around at the top to watch as Kira and her team rushed inside. As the hatch closed, Kira collapsed into a seat, breathing heavily. The Archalians were still out there, but they had made it. Lennox's voice crackled over the comms. "Get that shuttle out of here. Don't let them take the dog." Kira looked down at the golden retriever, who had settled at her feet, panting lightly but otherwise calm. "Don't worry, boy," she whispered. "We're not letting them take you." The shuttle lifted off, escaping the chaos of Orion's reach and plunging into the cold depths of space. Kira knew this wasn't over. The Archalians would keep coming. Others would too. Whatever the dog truly was, it was valuable, perhaps the most valuable asset in the galaxy. And as Kira sat back, the dog resting its head on her lap once more, she realized something: she and her team weren't just protectors anymore. They were the guardians of the galaxy's most dangerous and most mysterious creature. As the shuttle sped away into the vast unknown, the golden retriever slept peacefully, its tail still wagging in dreams of fetch, unaware of the war it had left behind and the battles yet to come.